It was a stormy night, rain battering the windshield as Mark sped down the winding, rain-slicked highway. Tired and disoriented, he regretted taking this unfamiliar shortcut. His GPS had long lost signal, leaving him alone in the thunderous downpour. Just when he thought things couldn't get worse, he spotted a lone figure on the roadside. A man drenched to the bone and looking utterly miserable. Mark's Good Samaritan instincts kicked in, and he pulled over. "Need a lift?" he shouted over the rain. The man nodded, gratitude in his eyes. He hopped into the car, his clothes dripping puddles onto the seat. "Thanks, mate. You're a lifesaver." Mark tried to make conversation, asking where the man was headed. The man introduced himself as Dave and said he was just trying to get home. They drove on in silence, the rain's relentless drumming providing a hypnotic backdrop. Mark couldn't help but notice that Dave was unusually quiet. "So, what do you do for a living, Dave?" Mark asked, trying to break the silence. Dave hesitated for a moment, then finally replied, "I'm a musician." Mark nodded, feeling relieved that Dave was opening up a bit. But something about the situation still didn't sit right with him. He couldn't put his finger on it, but unease gnawed at him. As they continued down the dark and winding road, Mark's unease grew. Dave's appearance seemed to shift subtly, and his skin appeared unusually pale. Mark couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. "Why'd you need a ride tonight?" Mark inquired, trying to keep the conversation going. Dave turned to him, his eyes strangely vacant. "I just needed to get away." Suddenly, the car's engine sputtered, and the headlights flickered and died. Panic surged through Mark as he tried to restart the car, but it refused to cooperate. His phone was out of battery, leaving them in complete darkness. In the pitch-black car, Dave's voice seemed to come from right beside Mark. "You shouldn't have stopped for me, Mark." Terrified, Mark fumbled for his flashlight, his trembling hands finally finding it. He shone it toward Dave, revealing a face that sent a chill down his spine. Dave's features were ghostly, his eyes hollow and empty. With a surge of fear-fueled adrenaline, Mark kicked open the car door and bolted into the stormy night. Behind him, he heard Dave's eerie laughter fading into the darkness. Hours later, a passing motorist found Mark on the roadside, soaked and trembling. He never spoke of the mysterious hitchhiker again, but the encounter haunted his dreams. To this day, travelers swap stories of the midnight traveler who appears on stormy nights, luring unsuspecting drivers into the unknown. Some say he's a lost soul seeking solace, while others believe he's a harbinger of the supernatural. One thing is clear: the legend of the midnight traveler endures, a cautionary tale for those who venture into the night. The night was as dark as a cave, and rain poured relentlessly from the heavens. Mike was navigating a lonesome highway, unfamiliar to him, thanks to a detour caused by roadwork. His knuckles gripped the steering wheel as he strained to see through the downpour. Just when frustration was about to overwhelm him, he spotted a figure ahead. A man, drenched and seemingly abandoned by the world, stood on the roadside. Mike's heart went out to him, and he pulled over. "Need a hand?" he called out through the torrential rain. The man nodded, his soaked hair clinging to his face. He climbed into the car, water dripping from every inch of him. He was silent, and Mike's attempts at conversation yielded nothing. As they drove deeper into the darkness, Mike couldn't help but feel uneasy about his passenger. His appearance seemed more disheveled with each passing mile, and a growing sense of dread enveloped the car. "So, where are you heading?" Mike finally inquired. The man turned to him, his eyes devoid of emotion. "Just keep driving." Mike felt a shiver down his spine. The situation felt increasingly surreal. He noticed the man's hands were icy cold, like death itself. Minutes dragged on as they continued down the desolate road. Mike had a nagging feeling that he was being led astray, but he couldn't shake the eerie sensation. "Why the secrecy?" Mike asked, his voice trembling. The man slowly turned toward him, a a sinister grin spreading across his face. "You'll find out soon enough." Suddenly, the car's engine sputtered and died, plunging them into darkness. The headlights flickered and went out. Panic coursed through Mike as he reached for his phone, only to find it unresponsive. He tried to open the car door, but it refused to budge. In the pitch-black cabin, he heard the man's voice again, chillingly close. "You shouldn't have picked me up, Mike." Desperation gripped Mike as he fumbled for his flashlight, his trembling hands finally finding it. He shone it toward the man, revealing a face twisted in malevolence. His skin was ashen, his eyes dark voids, and his lips curled into a sinister grin. With every ounce of courage, Mike kicked open the car door and fled into the stormy night. Behind him, he heard the man's unholy laughter as it faded into the darkness. Hours later, a passing trucker found Mike on the side of the road, soaked and terrified. He never spoke of the phantom hitchhiker again, but the memory haunted him for the rest of his days. The night was darker than any John had ever seen. Rain hammered against his windshield, creating a disorienting wall of water. He had taken a wrong turn onto a desolate highway, miles from civilization, and his GPS showed no signs of life nearby. Panic had begun to claw at him when he saw her, a lone figure standing by the side of the road, drenched and shivering in the deluge. With a sigh of relief, John pulled over. The woman's hair was matted, her clothes clung to her as if they were part of her skin. He rolled down the window and shouted, "Need a lift?" She nodded, her face hidden beneath the hood of her tattered coat. John felt a pang of sympathy as she climbed into the car, but her silence made him uneasy. The car's interior was filled with a tense silence. John decided to break it, attempting some small talk, but the woman remained eerily quiet. Her presence seemed to grow heavier with each passing mile. "So, where are you headed?" John finally asked, stealing a glance at her. She didn't lift her head, her voice barely above a whisper as she replied, "Home." John couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. He noticed her hands were ice cold and a chill ran down his spine. Still, he drove on, trusting his instincts to be overly cautious. Minutes turned into hours as they drove further into the darkness. The relentless rain showed no sign of letting up. John felt an overpowering urge to know more about his enigmatic passenger. "Where do you live?" he inquired. The woman slowly turned to him, her face twisted into a grotesque smile. "We're almost there," she whispered. Suddenly, the car's engine sputtered and died, plunging them into an inky blackness. The headlights flickered and went out. Panic surged through John as he fumbled for his phone, only to find it unresponsive. He tried to open the car door, but it wouldn't budge. He was trapped in the darkness with this nightmarish hitchhiker. In the pitch-black cabin, he heard her voice again, chillingly close. "You shouldn't have stopped for me, John." Desperate, John fumbled for his flashlight, his trembling hands finding it at last. He shone it toward the woman, revealing a face of horror. Her skin hung in tatters, her eyes were hollow sockets, and her mouth was a gaping maw. With newfound strength, John kicked open the car door and bolted into the rainy night. Behind him, he heard the woman's unearthly wail as she faded into the darkness. Hours later, a passing motorist found John on the side of the road, soaked and trembling. He never spoke of the nightmarish hitchhiker again, but he would forever carry the haunting memory of that eerie encounter on the desolate highway. And to this day, travelers whisper about the phantom hitchhiker who lures unsuspecting souls into the night, never to be seen again. Some say she's a vengeful spirit seeking companionship in the afterlife, while others believe she's a harbinger of doom, warning of the perils of the road at night. One thing is certain. The legend of the haunting hitchhiker lives on, etched into the darkest corners of the highway.